Hello everybody, welcome back. This is a quick, easy video on the cost breakdown of how I paid or funded myself through flight school. Before I get into this video, I need you to understand that I cannot give you a magic answer. I did not get any scholarships to fund myself, and also I can't really, I didn't come in any large lump sums of money to, go through the process. I wish I could give you an answer. I wish I could say you could walk down the street and get $50,000 in your hands and it will take care of the rest. But it didn't work out like that for me. More on that later in the video as to, just the observations I've made of myself and other student pilots going through the system. So we can touch on that towards the end on a little story. So, and I'll sum it up in a very quick, very easy manner before I get into details. I lived with my mom and dad, which kept, my bills down and debt down and everything. It was very simple. And then I just funded myself through flight school. And, when I made the decision to go get the private pilot license, I had lost my career job. With that loss of job, I did not have any money to put towards the private pilot license. However, I did have multiple retirement accounts. I had decided to take one of those retirement accounts and cash it out, paid the large lump sum of tax, took the remaining amount of money, which covered the private pilot. Side note as well, I'm not necessarily sure if how I funded myself through flight school was the smartest of manners or ways to do it, but it's how I did it, and now I'm on the other side. I'm debt-free and I have all the certificates, which does feel good. So the private pilot was paid with one of my retirement accounts. I had this logic, knowing the money I would make once I have the commercial license and, I'm on my way, that I could, so on one hand, I liquidated the smaller amount of money in that retirement account. But on the other hand, I could then reinvest money into the other existing retirement accounts at a higher rate once I'm a commercial pilot. So that's how the private pilot was done. The instrument portion was quite simple. It was 10 grand. And, I took up a data entry job throughout flight school. It had a flexible schedule. It paid well for what it was. It wasn't going to make me rich, but it certainly paid enough. And after the private pilot, I then studied on the ground for the instrument written test and just saved up 10 grand. Took the written test, spent $10,000 on instrument. After that, it was the commercial portion. Now, with the commercial portion, not only did I have to fulfill the commercial requirements, I had to fulfill the hour requirements for the license, and then I just had to, tie up any loose ends, to get me ready for the check ride. That was about $20,000. With that $20,000, I had asked mom and dad if they wanted to financially contribute, which they agreed. They gave me about half of it, and I covered the rest of that. I did come up a couple $1,000s short, but I just put that on a credit card. Very simple. I'm okay with spending a little bit amount of debt. No, because, it's just a couple grand. I can just, put that on the card and then reduce that very quickly, very easily. So that was the bulk of it. The private, the instrument, and the commercial with that. There was a rhythm, I'll say, I got myself into of studying on the ground for written, because studying's free. All those resources are online. So I would study on the ground and I would save money at the same time. Then I would spend money in the airplane on the plane and instructors and get that rating done, back in that rhythm, back to studying on the ground, back to saving money, so on and so forth. After that, I had gone for the CF single I and the double I. There's no real big requirements. It's not like a commercial where you have to do cross countries or nighttime, etc. So it was rather just simple. I think I spent like about $1,000 on plane rentals with the flight instructor, and then just a check ride. Once you're past the commercial license and you're going for a flight instructor, you're pretty proficient in the airplane, so I didn't put a lot of thought into how am I going to afford those because they're quite affordable to begin with. I will say this: my CF single eye initial check ride was not cheap. That was a $2,000 check ride. Just a heads up. I hope it's cheaper for you. After that, I had hit, after that, I was ready to be hired or at least apply for flight schools. And, that did take me some time to get hired. And in that meantime, I decided to get the multi engine as well, just because I had the time to do it. My fellow flight instructors, when I was a student, they were getting pulled in many different directions because not only were they flight instructing, they were also getting their multi-engine rating as well. I was sitting around not getting hired, patiently following up and everything. And I was like, you know what? This is a perfect opportunity to get the multi-engine. So looked around, did some research, and I believe the consensus is about $6,000. So I was like, all right, $6,000. I did ask mom and dad. I was like, hey guys, would you, like to financially contribute? They did agree. And, we just split it halfway, 3 on 3. I did it in under a month, flew as much as I could, studied as much as I could, and got that done. So that's basically, how I paid for it all. Now, there is, a couple other observations I made just, going through the system. Because when you're making the decision to be a student pilot, you have thoughts, you have ideas, you've listened to people, but you don't have the experience. So, and once you start getting experience, you can start, making observations or making decisions that will help you even more. So here's some things that experience had taught me, that can help you save money. Like, if you're inefficient with your time, it's going to cost you more money for your licenses and ratings. If you fly once a week, every week, versus if you fly 4 times a week, every week, you're going to, on the once a week side, it's going to take longer, and the longer it takes, the more money you're going to spend. So my advice to you is to fly more often than not. I proved that right with the multi-engine. I did it in under a month. I flew as much as I could, and I became very proficient at it and very quick at it. I didn't have to spend a lot of extra money to kind of, we'll say, tread water or keep my head above water, if I was out for a few weeks. So fly more frequently than not. There is a balance, I believe. Personal opinion. You can fly too much, but a sweet spot. Not too much, not too little. Also, this is kind of my opinion. I will disagree with it and I will agree with it. It really depends on the individual and the circumstances. But I've met a lot of student pilots who've taken on large amounts of debt and didn't get hired. It's, we can read headlines all day. What a first officer makes. And they're like, wow, I'll spend $50,000, $60,000 in debt, and I'll just pay that off within a year once I'm a first officer. Or, well, excuse me, not a first officer, but once I'm hired, because I know first officers technically, you're gonna be spending more than $60,000 to get to that FO position. But anyway, take on a large amount of debt with this thought that once I'm hired, I can pay it off very easily because I make a lot of money. It's a good thought. But what if you don't get hired? So I didn't personally want to take on a large amount of debt to get the flight school stuff done. Looking back at it, I do think it's a possibility where that's beneficial. It all just depends on the individual. So, let's say I had a job lined up that was, guaranteed. I wouldn't be opposed to, spending a large amount towards that to get it done, knowing that job will, help me pay it off. But I didn't have anything lined up. So I just moved as quickly as I could with the money that I had available to me. And it's worked out. Also, the thing is with being a student pilot is the more you fail, the more money it will cost you. Sort of as I previously mentioned, flying infrequently will cost you more money. Failing through the flight school process will also cost you more money. For example, here's an easy one. If you fail a check ride, you have to pay to take it over again. It may not be the full price, but you have to pay to take it over again. Study up, make sure you're ready, right place at the right time, etc., etc. Get that check ride done once the first time. Buy once, cry once, as they say. Not only that, I'll give you another example. With the instrument rating, I had got this down to a science. It was 20 minutes to do a full-on approach. To take off, go out to the approach, go back in and do the approach, go missed and go back. That was 20 minutes. So if the plane is $180 per hour rental, and it takes 20 minutes to do one approach, you bet I was getting that approach right the first time. 20 minutes, $180 an hour, that's $60 per approach. If I messed up that approach the first time and have to do it over again, guess what? That's another $60 out of my bank account. And, this is a flight school. I was a flight student, and I was with flight instructors. So there was a learning process. There were moments where I had failed, but it's definitely it's in your best interest to ensure that you can mitigate those failures, because the more you fail, the more money it will cost you. Plain and simple. I also this is just a random little observation followed up with a story, but I also made, I was starting to talk to people, network around and everything, and I was meeting pilots of all sorts of backgrounds. So trying to imagine it like a funnel, like here's the top of the funnel and then it funnels in. We were all going towards the license, but we all had different financial backgrounds. Myself, I'd lost my job. I cashed out a retirement account to pay for it, so I was here, but I got myself in the center. So if you're wondering on how you can fund yourself through this stuff, if there's a will, there's a way. And once you're in flight school in the system, and hearing other people's stories on how they, choose to fund themselves through flight school, you're going to learn you're not alone in, those thoughts on how am I going to pay for it as well. Matter of fact, there's a lot of pilots out there that are very established and very good. They have a huge reputation that I've met, and they came from nothing. You would think they came from something because you see them in those private jets, and you see them, some of them own a business or own an airplane, but they all came from nothing as well. So you're not alone in, coming from nothing, trying to fund it. There was this quick story that there was this guy who I had met. He owns a twin-engine airplane. He has it chartered, and he's very cool. And he's a bit of a robot with things. He doesn't have much of a personality. He's very good in the airplane. I really like him, but a lot of people don't really talk to him. A lot of people don't really know of his background. And I love the one sentence he once told me, just in a quick conversation. I was like, hey, what got you into flying? By the way, that's a fun question to ask everyone at the airport. What got you into flying? Walk up to the biggest, coolest person at the airport and say, hey, what got you into flying? Certainly get their attention. So anyway, I'm like, hey, what got you into flying? He's like, I had to work multiple jobs, and I put 100% into it, when I made that decision. He's like, I wanted to fly. I didn't come from anything, and I wanted to get it done. He's like, I worked whatever job it took to get it done, and I did. And now that guy, not only does he own the airplane, he is a business owner with the charter service, etc. You never would have guessed that he would say something like that. So there's instances like that as well. Anyway, not really sure if this video is helpful for most people, but it's just my story on how I got to the point of where I am. Thank you for your time.